Welcome to Sharing Parenting's positive mental health session on anxiety. I'm Ruth Allen and this is my colleague Nina Rogers.
So the aims of today's session is to recognise anxiety and to identify strategies to manage anxiety as a parent.
The definition, so the Oxford Dictionary definition of anxiety is that it is a feeling of worry, nervousness or unease, typically about an imminent event, that's something that's just about to happen, or sometimes with an uncertain outcome. Adler talks about it as a parent, that it's a natural feeling of inferiority. Whilst you're striving for perfection, you want everything to be just so, you don't feel like you belong, you're not quite sure what's happening, and you're not being capable to achieve all of these things that you're putting in yourself in life.
So now we're going to look at how to recognise anxiety in yourself and others. We often find that a lot of the symptoms of anxiety have physical effects on us, or they can be cognitive. So you might sweat, and this is a very physical symptom. It's due to feeling stressed, and your body's response to stress is to sweat.
You can have stomach issues because all of the worries and concerns are going around your head, and it's forgetting to actually digest the food that's in your stomach, and it can sit there and it can cause quite nasty pains.
Panic attacks, they can vary a little bit from person to person, and again it's a physical response to anxiety. It might be that the person needs to flee where they are, or it might be that they're finding that their breathing is speeding up and they're getting more and more anxious, and it's a very strong symptom of anxiety.
Constant worrying, all of these things are going around your head, they're not stopping, and you're thinking about the same thing over and over again. And that can be a vicious cycle. So you've just gone through one thing and you continue going through it, and then you can be constantly worrying.
So rapid heartbeat. So again, this is a physical symptom of anxiety. Your body is trying to respond to what it's feeling anxious about. And so by speeding up your heartbeat, it's trying to get you ready to react. It's just that a lot of the things that we feel anxious about these days, you perhaps don't need to have that rapid heartbeat.
You can get nasty headaches because your worries, they're going around your head. You get stressed, and if your head starts to feel a bit tense, you can get nasty headaches because of those worries that are constantly going around our brains.
So avoidance. So often people who are anxious will try and avoid what it is that makes them anxious, or they might try and delay doing something until the last minute because they're feeling anxious.
Insomnia, this means that you're not getting to sleep very well, and sleep is so important. If you're worrying about things, you go to bed at night and it's just a time where it's all peaceful and you should be calming down. Often your head ends up filling those spaces with the thoughts and anxieties that haven't left you, that you've not sorted out yet.
So trouble concentrating. So this is a very cognitive response to anxiety, and it's because when we are feeling anxious, our brain engages in fight or flight symptoms, and this takes part in the center of the brain, which is the primitive side of the brain. And the part of the brain where we concentrate and we come up with ideas is the outer part of the brain, and so that part isn't easily accessed when we get anxious.
A lack of patience, we can become quite snappy because our head is full of all of these things that are going on that we're worried about, and there's no space to take on board anything else. And at a time where perhaps normally things would be calm and we could manage these situations, we find we just can't.
So difficulty finding words. So this is another cognitive symptom, and it also is down to your fight or flight symptoms. So again, because the central part of the brain is engaging the outer parts of the brain where we find our words, isn't able to be accessed, and so you can often struggle if you're doing speech or talking to someone and you've become anxious. Often you can't find those words, and that's why.
Memory loss, very similar to finding the words, is we've got our heads so full of all these other things, all these other worries, that we haven't got space to access the other memories because we're too busy thinking about the stuff that's at the front and is taking all of our concentration. Anxiety can also be a positive thing. It's anxiety and worries that have kept us safe in the past and kept us existing as human beings. They make us recognise dangers. If there's a car that's suddenly come around the corner when we're crossing the road, all of these things kick in and we can run to safety, or we run back, or we stay still so that we're safe. It can also be a motivator. It can get us going to really strive and succeed in things where perhaps it feels a bit uncomfortable to go, that our anxieties and worries can actually push us to go even further when we're perhaps maybe not going there before the anxiety or the worries kicked in. And you're not alone. It's important to recognise that anxiety is common and everybody suffers from anxiety. It's the most common mental health issue.
So anxiety can make us imagine the worst case scenario. So sometimes what happens is we get into a bit of a cycle of only thinking about negative things. And the other thing to think about with anxiety is, am I worrying about something that is likely to happen? Or am I worrying about something that is very, very unlikely to happen? It's a little bit like perhaps when it's with children being afraid of the dark and they imagine that there's monsters and things like that. It's not likely to happen, but because we're focusing on the negative, that's what our brain imagines. So strategies to help with anxiety. So we're going to explore some of these. You may have some different strategies. These are some of the ones that we've come up with to help.
Talking. It's really important to talk about what it is that's worrying you, and we encourage children to do the same thing, because when you talk about it, it can become clearer, but also the person you're talking to, they may just listen empathetically, or they may give you some advice, and that can be so helpful.
So another strategy is to identify triggers. So there might be something small that's happening that's making you feel anxious that you haven't recognised. Or it might be that actually there's a small thing that you can change which will alleviate your anxiety. So we're going to explore this in a little more detail in the next slide.
Mindfulness and breathing. This is about thinking about the here and now. So wherever you are, even in this moment, you can just think, well, what am I doing? What is around me? It's trying to switch off from all the worries and putting yourself into the part of the world that you're actually sitting in. And you can take a moment just to take some gentle breaths, to smell the air, feel what's going on around you. And there are some really useful apps online to help with bringing yourself back to the here and now.
So another strategy we have is self-care. So in sharing parenting, we refer to this as filling your jug. And sometimes what can happen is we can end up getting a bit run down. We end up with an empty jug, and it actually means that we can't cope with everyday life as well, because we haven't got the energy, because we've let our jug become unfull. So self-care will vary from person to person what that looks like. It might be for going for a walk, it might be going to meet friends, it might be watching your favourite movie, having your favourite meal. But whatever it looks like for you, it's making sure that you make time to give yourself that self-care will have a positive impact on your mental health.
Looking after your physical health is also extremely important. This means making sure you've had enough sleep, making sure you've eaten well and drunk nice drinks that can be good for your body. So having enough sleep, they recommend 8 hours sleep for an adult. I know that can be quite tricky when you've got little ones. So even if you know that your child is going to wake through the night, perhaps trying to take a nap when they do, trying to look at what time you should be going to bed in the evening and trying to calm and rest and getting as much rest for yourself as you can.
So exercise is well known to release positive hormones in the body, and so hopefully will counteract some of the negative ones that are linked with anxiety. It's also quite good for distraction as well. So if you're feeling a bit stressed, to go and get some exercise can be really, really helpful.
Finding humour in things is really important.
Yes.
If you can't laugh, you can end up crying. So it's important to see the funny side of things and to enjoy life for what it is. And perhaps sometimes try not to take life quite so seriously.
So another strategy you could use is keeping a diary. Similar to talking, it's about getting those feelings and those worries out, in this case on paper. And sometimes by doing that, it can alleviate the stress. Again, you might be able to find things that are causing the anxiety and change them. So a really useful tool, and also something really good to perhaps look back on as well, may help you.
It's important to realise we cannot control everything. We can only control ourselves. So if we're looking at a situation, it's trying not to sort all of that out, but actually looking at what we can do about ourselves. And when we see where we have our own controls, then it can take some of the anxieties away, because we realise actually they're not our anxieties at all to worry about. We just need to sort out ourselves.
So another really important one is to prepare for the situation. So for example, if you're feeling anxious about going to a job interview, it might be that you try out going to the job interview before, so you know the route, so you're not worried about arriving late or worried about getting a parking space. It might be that you do some research about the company that you're going to work. You might practice doing some interviews. All those types of things, all that sort of preparation can help alleviate some of the anxiety that you may feel. Okay, so identifying triggers. So as we mentioned in the last slide, it can be really useful to look at what might be the cause of the anxiety. And often if you can slightly change your approach, it can really, really help. So what you need to do is to think about what actually are you feeling anxious about? And then what has been a trigger in the past? So thinking about what happened before, what happened when you felt anxious, and what happened afterwards. And what can you do about it? So there might be small things that you can change to help alleviate that anxiety. It might be bringing someone with you to wherever it is. It might be giving yourself a little bit of extra time. It may even be giving yourself that little bit of self-care before, so you're making sure that you've got the energy to deal with what's worrying you. And then finally thinking about, what do I choose to be important today? Is what you're worrying about worth worrying about in the grand scale of things? It might be that actually it's a very small thing, and so you're worrying about something unnecessarily.
It's important to remember that anxiety is normal. We all have it. It exists due to a set of bodily functions that we all have, again, kicking in to make us aware of change that needs to be made. It's important to keep a perspective on things, and that social media today can make us feel more anxious about things that, again, are out of our control, and without the social media wouldn't be a problem to us.
So we're just going to look at some unhelpful strategies that sometimes we fall into. So the first one we've got is not talking. And so what is quite common is we can feel like we're the only person that ever feels like this. We're the only person who gets anxious, but as we've already explained, actually anxiety is really common, and most people experience it in their lifetimes from time to time. So it's important to talk about it. Sometimes talking about it, as we said, is really, really positive. Bottling it up, however, is really negative.
Late nights are not helpful, because that means that we've not had all of the sleep that we need, and then that can bring on all sorts of anxieties the next day, because we start to overthink things and we're not able to deal with stuff because we're so tired. So it's important to recognise when it is night time, looking outside, thinking, what is the time? Do I need to start unwinding? And getting yourself a good night's sleep to help the next day.
So avoidance is a common characteristic of anxiety, but can be quite detrimental, because sometimes people avoid the situation because they feel anxious. But if it's something that you can't eventually avoid, it can then make it much more worse if you then haven't done it for a while. So sometimes it's about not avoiding it, but thinking about some of the other strategies that we've given you.
Being dependent on substances like alcohol and cigarettes, they're a quick fix and can be quite detrimental to your health as well. We've talked about looking after your health. So it's important to think, actually, what is it I really need? Because the alcohol might help you that evening, but then the next day you can often feel worse for it, and then you've got to struggle through the next day. Sometimes you can have your treats, and people do things in different ways, but it's important to look at actually what are you relying on, and is it healthy? Is it going to be okay?
So what we often find as well is, as parents, we can cause ourselves a lot of anxiety because we're worrying about what other people think, and we put pressure on ourselves to be perfect and have unrealistic expectations. What we need to do is think about, am I getting worried about something because I'm worried what someone else will think, or is it something that's actually really important to me and my family? And also, we've just put a little quote in here: comparison is the theft of joy. So what we're talking about here is not to overly compare yourself with other people. You often will fall short if you compare yourself all the time. So it's really, really important just to put things in perspective and not to be thinking too much about other people judging you.
So thank you very much for listening to our presentation. There's some useful links here to help. If you are looking at the presentation, you think, oh, I've got so many of those things and I really need some extra support, and you've tried different things, then obviously, as I say, the links are there, but also you can visit your GP, have a chat with them, and they should be able to signpost you to other areas to help you as well. So there's always help out there. And obviously, looking at our Facebook page, you can always give us a call and we can help to signpost you in different directions as well. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.